going, it's going to be 70 by groundhogs again. A lot of environmental scientists get upset with global warming. If this is what it means, bring it on. Okay, it doesn't seem that bad. I'll just start grow wheat in Alaska or something like that. Anyway, all right. The tennis sheet's going around. It's got your name on it, so just sign next to your name. Use your signature there. I'm not trying to start credit cards in the name. That's Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, by the way, did you see that he's forcing everybody into this new Facebook? That's who he is. He's a real humanitarian. He's like Robert Moses. He really loved people. Anyway, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about the theoretical perspectives. And I hope Zuckerberg hears that on the tape. Although I plan to make some money off his IPO. So keep up the good work there, Mark. Anyway, so today we're going to go back over some of the ideas of the theoretical perspective. Again, remember, there's three main theoretical perspectives, and then there's postmodernism, which is not considered by a lot of sociologists to be, it's kind of probably the way they treated some of Newton's laws when he first proposed them, or what Einstein did. New scientific ideas or new theoretical ideas always have a hard time busting through and getting past the tradition and the power of a theoretical perspective, like functionalism, which is stuck around way longer than what it's needed. It's like the ATF. It doesn't. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms department does not need to exist. It's in prohibition. Nobody's smuggling cigarettes. I mean, seriously, So, but it still exists because the people there make a good wage and they have power, and they're not going to let their jobs go down the crap hole. So they sit around and justify other things they can do. And similar with functionalism, it's been revised and adapted to other things. But frankly, in sociology, most sociologists do not talk about functionalism like it's something that it's usable. Although, again, one of the things that we're going to examine is it is important to look at the functions of social institutions and how they integrate. So that's one element of functionalism that we will use. Secondarily, conflict theory is one of the probably most important and significant theoretical perspectives in this sense. That not only it describes what many people feel is the realistic situation in the world, that it's like the Occupy Wall Street, the one percenters, that a small percentage of people, and we'll talk about Mills's ideas today, control, particularly in certain social institutions, the military, political, economic elites, control things, and they decide when things change, when things are going to stay the same, how much money you make, what kind of jobs are going to be available, how much the federal government spends money on. You don't get to make any of these decisions. And in technical reality, you don't even get to vote for the president, do you? Like in 2000, who won the popular vote? By 200,000 votes. Not by 5. Not by 1. Now, in the first count, he won for it by like 200 or something. And then Bush won it by 700, and then it went back and forth. And remember, they were counting chads and holding things up. And the Supreme Court came along and said, you know what? There should be a recount, but there's not enough time. So the decision, the final standings of the last Florida election count, George Bush is the president. Even without that reality, if you're not in a Republican or Democratic Party, you don't get to decide who's the nominees. If you're a third-party supporter, your candidate doesn't even get on television. And on top of that, the presidency is actually voted upon by electors, who nobody knows, or very little people know who these people are, know their names. They're actually not. The tradition is they vote for the candidate that their state votes for. But are they held to that by law? Does anybody know? No. They can vote for Mickey Mouse, Miley Cyrus. Like those two things are different. Anyway. She did have the Mickey Mouse in at one point, so now she's turned into some kind of Britney Spears monster or something. Anyway. Although maybe she'll get away from her father. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure you guys are reading. So what was the other theory? So what was the first chapter about that you were supposed to read for today? Huh? That was one of them, but I don't think that was the first one, was it? There was one right before it. No, wait, you're right. Oh, the second one. Sorry about that. That's my stupid fault. What's the second one? The article by Todd Gitlin. Kind of short article. Probably was somewhat confusing because this is one of the This is like the black sheep of the theoretical perspective. Nobody like to touch this one? Or striped sheep, whatever one you do. Postmodernism, right? And probably some of you are confused about what it even means. We're going to talk about that today. And that's part of the problem. It's like when you have a moral relativistic reality where, like one of the reasons why many critics say that the 60s kind of movement of fell down was the fact that they had this general creed of whatever feels good, do it. Can you see that you can't run an organization that way, that a society can't operate that way? And I think postmodernism is sort of that way. It means so many things. It means whatever you want it to mean. Which means, it means what? Nothing. It means nothing to some people. Other people, postmodernism is a way to look at, hey, we've moved beyond the modern world where people's goals are just to be comfortable and secure themselves and stabilize society. We have moved to a world where you can get information at your fingertips. Traditional sources of power have now been de-emphasized, whereas new forms of, like, talking over the telephone has been de-emphasized for texting, and traditional power brokers, like older institutions, are now giving way to things like Facebook and Google and Apple. Apple right now, based on their earnings, which doubled this year. So I'm sure Steve Jobs is happy, if you can get money in heaven, the afterlife. Some people would say that I don't think he's going to heaven. You abuse Chinese workers for years and years and have no idea or no desire to change that. But Apple has now become, by market cap, the largest company in the world. They beat out ExxonMobil. And frankly, if I owned a business, I wouldn't want the name of my business in the same sentence as ExxonMobil. Unless it was, this company is now taking on ExxonMobil. So anyway, there's my one editorial for today. There's not many friends of ExxonMobil out there. Okay? And then what was the other article about? It was actually from an intro textbook. Very important to institutions and what we're looking at. Read it. Right, and we'll talk about what that means today. We probably won't get to everything in that chapter, so we will extend the conversation into Monday. Make sure you read the rest of the book. I know on the syllabus it looks like about 70 pages. It's actually not. Okay, it's 88 to 153, but there are a lot of notes. Also, because I've had questions like this in the past, the questions at the end of the chapter, you don't need to answer those. Okay. Or at the end of the other, you may want to look through the key terms and the conclusions of these chapters. These are like similar to intro class chapters. I do this as a bit of review, and also to give you more like updated statistics on family and marriage and work. Because in our first main section, when we talk about the time bind, we're going to talk about the intersection point of all these things. So we will extend that out. Also, I'm going to go over Obama's speech and see if there's anything that we can use to discuss. If he talked about any work-friendly programs and things like that. I believe his speech was 65 minutes, which is like, I've been sitting in that stuffy room, 500 other people breathing in and out all of it. I'd be like, come on, man. And also on top of that, now you know why the federal government wastes so much money. Look how much time they waste. I mean, let me put it this way. I know Obama was setting his agenda, and it's required by Congress that he goes up. Some presidents go up there, talk for 5 minutes, and leave. But through him speaking, did anything get done? Did the housing market get better? Did the unemployment rate go down when he was talking? Because he was talking? Did any terrorists die because he was talking? So what was the point? Just to communicate to the American public that we're working on things? Okay? And now you're starting to see why people are some people at least, are critical of politicians. Now, again, this is not my personal opinion, but some people would say, see, this is why nothing gets done in the federal government, because all they do is sit around and yak and yak and yak. It's like a Seinfeld episode. They just go to a coffee shop and talk. Nothing gets done. And here's the other thing. If you want to get reelected, is it good sometimes that nothing happens? That you don't vote on any legislation or propose it? What's the problem if you vote on something or you propose something and then you're up for reelection?
causes issues and it causes difficulties for people.
You might upset somebody who before was going to vote for you. Now they're not because you supported gay marriage or against abortion rights or for abortion rights or voted to raise the national debt, right? So that could be a serious problem. So there's actually a benefit for the Congress to sit around and do absolutely nothing, which they're expert at. And they are. They are. Name one thing the Congress has done for you in the past 5 or 6 years. The Obama health care bill? That actually is going to force all of you to buy health care insurance. When you're healthy at 28, you're going to have to spend $400 or $500 a month on a ridiculous health care plan that in the end, if you need any emergency care, is not going to help you. You're going to have to go on Medicare. We'll see. Obama supported it. Democrats liked it. They say, hey, look, it's going to drive prices down. Republicans say the opposite. We'll see what happens. Okay, certainly. Okay. All right, let's move on here. So I'm glad everybody's reading. Let me start out by reading from the book, since we are talking about the power elite. And I like these first few chapters because they discuss the theoretical perspectives, they give characteristics of them. We'll come back to the sociological imagination at one point. And I know Mills writes a little odd, and it's about his stuff is 6 years old. It's painful for me because when I was a kid, the 50s were just like right there. Now they're 60 years away. And that must seem like ancient history to some 1950s. Anyway, but on chapter 38, under the power elite and C. Wright Mills, and remember there are differing versions of conflict theory. The main break is Marxist and non-Marxist. Even things like feminist theory is a form of, it can be considered a form of conflict theory. But Mills was not a Marxist, but he was he was a social critic, and he criticized the power that was concentrated in the power elite. And he said, all right, fine, you have a nominal democratic system. You have a nominally entrepreneurial capitalist system that suggests that individuals, no matter what class, have power. Mills says otherwise. He said, you're being fooled. You're being bamboozled. You're being made to think you have power. But all the real decisions get made behind the scenes. And he would point out things like the American Revolution, that the wealthy elites of the colonies used the patriotism and anger that the average person in America had towards England to start a war that they had very little intention of actually engaging in themselves. Ben Franklin wasn't at the front, was he? The only one you can name that was really at the front was George Washington. Did he get killed? It was said, though, that he did like to lead his troops from out front. So, anyway. Reminds me of the Civil War. Lincoln didn't go out and get shot. Although eventually he did get killed. So. That's pretty bad when the booth in 4 theaters is more dangerous than a battlefield. And who let Booth in? You know, I know he was an actor, so people saw him around.
He did the whole plan.
Huh?
He planned it out. Did you ever read Killing Lincoln?
I haven't read that book. I've read a couple about the assassination itself, and I've seen several documentaries.
It's very interesting. There's a whole conspiracy.
Yeah, Booth is actually quite an interesting character. People just look at him as some scumbag murderer. It's actually way more interesting that his family was a very famous acting family. There's a theater named after their family in Washington, D.C. Even though that he killed the president there. And I actually got to go, we had a National Youth Leadership Conference, we got to watch a movie in Ford's Theater, so it was kind of fun. But anyway, you're right. They actually wanted to kill the Vice President and the Secretary of State and a lot of his co-conspirators chickened out or whatever. One of them was insane, basically. So you're right. It was fascinating what they were trying to do. And it actually backfired. Booth thought he would be a hero. He thought he would be a hero. He thought this was patriotism and I'm helping everybody and stuff like that. He was actually a Broadway actor, too. Anyway, but back to the power elite on page 38. It says, except for the unsuccessful Civil War, changes in the power system of the United States have not involved important challenges to its basic legitimation. He's saying, look, change happens, but it's not we're going from capitalism to another system or democracy to another system or individualism to collectivism. That there's minor changes, sometimes major changes, but not that are discordant with America's ideals like capitalism and democracy. Urbanization, industrialization is fine, as long as it takes place within the guises of capitalism or democracy, right? Even when they have been decisive enough to be called revolutions, they have not involved the resort to the guns of a cruiser, the dispersal of an elected assembly by bayonets, or the mechanisms of a police state. We have never had an incident other than some assassinations. Here's the thing. When Booth assassinated Lincoln, did the government just go in disarray and we had to form an entirely new type of government? No, the vice president stepped up and said, all right, and his name was Andrew Johnson. And he was impeached, actually. It was a succession. One of the reasons why Booth and the conspirators wanted to kill all the rest of those people was that was the line of succession. They wanted to kill the head of the Speaker of the House, the Secretary of State, the Vice President. That way they wouldn't have had a succession. And if you think about it, had they succeeded in killing all 5 or 6 of those people, it would have been enough to throw the government in array for a while, but I don't think it would be enough to be a democratic system. Like, we've never had an issue where someone said, all right, because of Richard Nixon, we're going to a parliamentary system. Right? It just doesn't happen. And even in 2008, when the entire, and I just saw polling data, and I'll look it up on Gallup, 70% of Americans say capitalism is broken. And yet, have we abandoned the system completely? No. Some critics would say, look, you got the government owns AIG, the government owns Fannie and Freddie, they almost own every mortgage. The government technically owns a piece of every mortgage in the almost every mortgage in the United States. The government provides subsidies for farmers, for corporations, for pharmaceutical companies. They are deeply involved in defense technology, in defense material, aerospace. So, yes, we are not totally a socialist country, but there are elements of this economy that look awful socialistic. Don't they? Like, a true conservative or a libertarian would ask, why is the government providing disability benefits to people? Why is the government providing a pension for people? What is that about? People should save their own money. Here's the other, and libertarians would say something like this. You know what you're encouraging people to do when you give them their retirement and health care from the time they're 65 to the time they die? You're encouraging them not to take care of their body, and you're encouraging them not to save money. That's what happens when the government takes, that, at least it's what the critics would say, not me, if I had little horns. I want to go get a pitchfork, that way I'm holding it, the way you know I'm playing devil's advocate. Okay? But again, hardcore conservatives say that is not capitalism. I don't know what that is. Okay? Some kind of weird muted socialism. And even with all the disaster that has befallen the economy, have you heard a lot of people going, you know what, maybe we should just be socialist. Let's be communist. That works. It's almost like capitalism isn't, it's got serious issues, but it's the best thing going, right? Yes?
Well, it's also, everybody agrees that there's a problem, we just don't have
Serious
a
problem.
solution. Yeah, we all know there's something broken. But every one of us has a different idea of what should be fixed, how it should be fixed, and in which timeline it should be fixed.
Right, and that accounts for a lot of the partisan bickering and sort
It's
of.
almost like Social Security. Everybody knows it's going to go broke, we just don't agree.
We can't decide on whether should we raise taxes, lower benefits, means test, get rid of the program. It's like Medicare.
Take it public, take it
And the problem is many times the more they tinker and the more they play with the system, the worse it gets. Like, it's like a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid on top of a serious wound. You need to get the bullet out and then close the wound up before you can heal it, and we're just putting Band-Aids over like severe lacerations, and it's just getting infected, right? It's getting more and more worse, and unfortunately, this is what happens is we get a Republican office, and then they repeal and pull back on some of these reforms, and then we get a Democrat in office, and they put it back in place. So it's almost like we took 2 steps this way, and then 2 steps this way, and in the end we end up standing in the same spot with a serious problem again. And again, remember, because of democracy and people wanting to get elected, you don't want to be the one who cuts somebody's favorite program. Do you want to be the one who cuts school lunch programs for poor kids? That's what you want on your record? You want somebody who cuts education dollars? You want somebody who cuts defense spending? Right? You're not going to get elected that way. And I think, unfortunately, when do House members go up for re-election? Every 2 years. It's essentially perpetual campaigning, isn't it? You get inaugurated in January, and within, 22 months you got to go up, or less than that, in November of the year after that, right? So if you were elected in 2010, you were sworn in January 2011, you're already running for office right now. especially if you've got a serious competitor. Look at the presidential race. It started in December. And it's going to go on for a while.
A lot of the problems also happen stem from the fact that most of the citizenry that votes in this country, we suffer from ADD.
Well,
And slogans. I mean, we
I-
death panels.
right. I know you sort
They
of
focus on like little like 3-word things, and they carry whole campaigns in them.
sound bites. Yeah, I understand. I hope you're not. I know you probably just like being facetious. I mean, you're right. The Americans seem to have a very small attention span. So,
Just the way politicians treat us, that's what it shows.
to some
There's no
extent,
serious
and
debate.
there's the bigger point. Because the political debates are so.
But there is no debate. They just go up there, give us sound bites, and then we go on.
Well, the problem is it's so off-turning to most people to hear people argue and attack and throw mud instead of getting to the real issues. Or if they are going to talk about issues, it's always one extreme over the next. And unfortunately, for the primary process, because it's usually the zealots in the party, the most extreme elements who decide who these candidates are, that often gets into a debate. Like, for example, Newt Gingrich attacking Mitt Romney. If Mitt Romney becomes the nominee, you know what Obama's going to do? He's just going to go back and look at what Newt Gingrich said, and he's going to annihilate him. And the Republican Party, I think, inside itself, there are people saying, "Look, you've got to quit this crap." Okay, you know, it's like if Russia and Ukraine started a war when they should realize they should be fighting the United States instead, right? It's like, hey, let's back off, see who the real enemy is, and for the Republicans, it's Obama. And stop doing this. But Gingrich is not somebody who's going to... He's a bulldog. He ain't going to sit there and take crap from Mitt Romney, some moderate from Massachusetts who has god-awful amounts of money. And not that Gingrich is poor or anything like that. So. But let me continue here with the reading. Nor have they involved in any decisive way any ideological struggle to control masses. Changes in the American structure of power have generally come about by institutional shifts in the relative positions of the political, the economic, and military orders. Part of what he's saying here is, in the piece, is that real social change only takes place when there's a battle between elite groups. The church and the state and the economic institutions. You actually see this play out in a much larger time scale in Europe. The church was dominant, then the monarchies became dominant, then capitalists became dominant, knocked the monarchies out, and then you had dictatorships and fascist governments that colluded with capitalism. And now, for the most part in Europe, you have democratic capitalist states, although France, Sarkozy is actually in the Socialist Party. In Europe, it's a lot more acceptable to say you're a socialist. In America, that gets, your family might disown you. They threw people in jail for this kind of stuff. It wasn't some little thing. If you were, in America, up until probably the 1980s, if you were a socialist, you were a traitor. In the minds of many people, you were a traitor, especially Ronald Reagan. You had no hope. Right? Why would you believe in socialism? This is the ultimate free marketeer. Ronald Reagan. He once said that government is not the solution to the problems, government is the problem. That's what he said. That's part of the reason why he won an election. But anyway, so let's go to the slideshow. Does anybody have any questions, though, on the reading? I know it's kind of a little odd. One of the things also that he said was, it's not like these, he said the big three, political, economic, military elites. He's saying here that they share values and goals and standards, and you have to ask yourself, he's not trying to suggest that they get in the room and go, okay, this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to pretend like there's a big crisis, and then we're going to fake a bailout and take a bunch of money. It's not like a big Ponzi scheme like with Bernie Madoff and Sir Alan Stanford get in a room and say, you know what, let's rob a bunch of people of their money. It's more the fact that they go to the same schools, they're indoctrinated into the same ideological perspectives, they share political identification that's similar to each other, their kids go to the same schools and they go to the same country clubs, so they see each other all day. You think Obama and Bloomberg don't know each other? You think Bloomberg doesn't know every wealthy person in the United States virtually? I would love to see his Rolodex or his cell phone. I would love to see it. Probably got Warren Buffett, Donald Trump, President Obama, probably Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. And I'll tell you right here, here's another proof. When Bloomberg calls the president on the phone, is he going to take the phone call? If I call the president right now, is he going to take my phone call? I'm not. There's probably some things I could probably. I doubt there's anything I can say to the person on the other end of the line to get Obama on the phone. If he don't answer the phone, I'm not going to vote for him. I could say stuff like, hey, I found some terrorists, you know, wherever, somewhere in New York, and you better come get them. They'd probably be like, yeah, this is called Homeland Security. I don't think there's anything in this world I could say to Obama other than I'm your long-lost cousin. And I'm not even sure that would do it. Not that he doesn't. When you're the president, you're busy, right? So you have to limit the number of people you speak to. So you limited them to powerful people, right? That's why I love the fact, who did Obama have in his box yesterday? You guys remember? It was Warren Buffett's secretary. And the reason why is because Warren Buffett was complaining. And he's a billionaire investor. They call him the Oracle of them all. He's an older guy. He owns Berkshire Hathaway, which the shares are worth like, the A shares are worth $250,000. It's not ridiculous. The B shares, I think, are like $10,000 to $12,000 a piece. He said that he was up, he calculated his taxes, and he only paid a 15% tax rate. That's what Mitt Romney also said, which is, you know, what a lower or middle class person would pay income tax wise. But he gets most of his money from earnings and investments, so you pay the capital gains tax. And he was complaining. He said, he told Obama, there should be a special millionaires tax because my secretary pays more percentage-wise of her income and taxes than I do. So Obama wanted to use that to say, see, even millionaires want their taxes raised. And that just shows you the power of elites in society, that it's pretty clear that the American people on the whole, and even some millionaires, want the upper tax rate increased to 30% or something. It's not going to get done. Not anytime soon. And you got to ask yourself, why is it that... And I always love it when Congress votes itself a pay raise, too. It's always a good one. They're the only body that can vote, except for a corporate board, that can vote their own pay rate. Right? And we'll see if it happens. If it happens, maybe Mills is a little bit wrong. If it doesn't, you can chalk it up to the power elite. Right? People have accused, critics of George Bush said, all you did when you got in office is give all your friends a tax break at the expense of the middle class. Bush would come back and say, hey, I cut taxes for everybody. Bill Clinton, when George Bush cut taxes, said, I got a $2 million tax decrease. I didn't need it. And part of me was like, well, why don't you give it back? But you know what? Would you want to voluntarily give money to the federal government? They always do correct things with it, right? They would never waste your money. They go out and they build parks and low-income housing, you know, right? They surely got Obama without any fuss, right? I mean, let me back up. I'm going to have to edit that out. That's actually a mistake that CNN made. I think I mentioned this before. They had a thing that had Osama bin Laden's picture on it, and it said, where's Obama? Anyway, let me back up. The federal government got Osama bin Laden in a reasonable amount of time, right? 10 years? So they spend your money properly, don't they? That's why we have, all of our Humvees have armor on them, right? All of our soldiers are well paid when they come back from Iraq, right? They're well taken care of, they get a house, they get education. When I was in Alaska, which is a lot of military people there, privates would work at McDonald's to supplement their income. And not because they wanted to buy a Ferrari. Because you're not going to buy a Ferrari working at McDonald's if you're doing that right now. Just to pay the bills. My dad's sick from Agent Orange. They haven't given him a dime. He's dying from this. He's got Parkinson's. They don't even recognize that as a real disease. They deny it completely. Some people have gotten money, but they're not going to give it to him. So, anyway, so there's a lot of issues with the government. And Mills is trying to say that one of the reasons why there are is because the government, even though it says it's of the people and for the people, doesn't give a damn about the people. The government only concerns itself about one thing, and that's the position of elites, and make sure they're comfortable and they have enough of whatever they need. And whatever crumbs we get, that's fine. I think, John, you were saying that at least they give us crumbs, right? Because in the Soviet Union, you don't even give you crumbs. Poisonous crumbs. Moldy crumbs.
Lots of vodka.
Yeah. That's how they ply people. It's like, let's just keep them drunk. The problem is with that proposition is that if you use alcohol to knock people down, sometimes they get mad and they get drunk. Like in Germany, the trouble started in beer halls. Okay, that's where Hitler was running his mouth. So sometimes when you get people drunk, they start going, yeah, you remember what so-and-so did? Other times it's like, who cares? Anyway, so from the slide here, to back up what was said in the book, what Mills called the big three, and he would also add, we'll talk down here, that the big three controls the majority of what goes on in society. These other institutions are secondary, but they are important and instrumental in reinforcing the values. Like every time we start a war, you see religious groups come out in support of war. Why is that strange that Christian, particularly Judeo-Christian, and particularly Christian churches, should come out in favor of war? Jesus is a warrior? Carry guns around? He's a troublemaker, right? Remember when he flipped over the tables in the temple? Why are Christian organizations supporting war? And why is that weird? Is it weird? Maybe I'm just stupid. What's the stated position that the Christian faith from the New Testament has about violence? Is it right or wrong? What did Jesus say when someone smacks you in the face? You should do. Is that what the United States does? Is that what the military should do? Is that their creed? No! If you even look at me funny, I'm going to bomb you into the Stone Age. That's the position of the military. We weren't even attacked by Iraq once, and then we attacked them twice. People say, well, it's for Kuwait. Well, what do we care about Kuwait? That's a monarchy, and they abuse their people. They didn't give us no you'd think they'd give us 50% off gasoline after we spent $5 or $6 billion helping them out. Luckily, we didn't have a lot of troops die, right? Imagine how quick we'd have been in Afghanistan if they had oil. So anyway, but again, also things like the media. Did you see any real opposition to the Second Iraq War in the media, or did they just go right along with it, cheerleading? That's what many people feel. That, first of all, some reporters knew the yellow cake uranium stuff out of Nigeria was a complete lie. Was Iraq involved in 9/11 at all, from the evidence? Did the Bush administration know that Iraq wasn't involved? Some people say they did, John.
Yeah, they did.
So you saying they did that on purpose? Believe it or not, if you guys want to know, especially those of you who are Republicans, you want to know what kind of a vice president you had in office. There is a documentary on PBS's Frontline about Dick Cheney. I can't remember what it's called. I'll send you the link for it. And it says that on 9/11, while the buildings were still burning, Rumsfeld and Cheney came in and said, "Man, we got to pin this on Iraq somehow." You sure Iraq's not involved? Bush was obsessed from the time he was in office. He thought his dad didn't finish the business. Him and his dad got a contentious relationship. I think his dad thinks he's a goof off. He had to bail him out of jail several times. He always thought Jeb would be the president. And he thought Bush was just some stupid frat boy. It's like, I can't believe I named him George Jr. kind of stuff. I'm serious. I want to say, and I'll find you the quote. George Bush Sr. said, "I'm shocked that he got to the president." I'm telling you, he said this about his own son. And so, and Bush W. always loved Reagan. And it's so funny that he would disrespect his father, but he thought, hey, my dad was dumb and didn't take Saddam out in the first one. I'm going to do it for him. And I'll be lauded and applauded and venerated for it, and they'll build statues to me. Okay? And again, the media didn't say anything. I can forgive them for weapons of mass destruction because the Democrats thought they had weapons of mass destruction. But here also what I would say. Do you really think the U.S. military would go willy-nilly into a situation where somebody had chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons with 150,000 troops? Do you know what a nuclear weapon could do in a tactical field of battle? 150,000 troops are going to be reduced to dust. You ever seen pictures of that? The bomb we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, whatever way you pronounce it, that's nothing compared to what we got now. We have missiles that can go into the atmosphere, break into 5 or 6 warheads, and destroy 5 cities at once. They're 1,000 times more destructive than what we had back then. And here's another thing. One of the excuses that was used for the invasion of Iraq was that this guy was a dictator and he was mean to his people. Is the guy in North Korea nice to his people? Does he have nuclear weapons? Yeah, now you know why we're not attacking him. And besides, we already fought a war there and it was a draw. And ugly. Believe it or not, I know most Americans don't realize this. The Chinese poured soldiers over the troop. We fought Chinese soldiers on the Korean Peninsula. On the battlefield. We've actually fought a war with Chinese soldiers. Okay, now you know why they're a little suspicious of us. Partly it's because MacArthur wanted to go all the way to China. He was like, screw it. You can't stop me. Go ahead and stop me. I think he was still mad about the Philippines. Anyway, MacArthur was a bit of a nut. He ran for president in '48. He also had this big corncob pipe and a hat on. He was like the classic look of a general. So anyway, so one of the things they say is that these people are socialized into this environment. For example, Obama went to Harvard. He's a lawyer. Bush went to Harvard and Yale. Clinton went to Yale. In Oxford. Hillary went to Yale. McCain didn't. I'm not sure where he went.
Harry was there.
Yes. It was funny. You had in 2004 you had two Yaleys fighting over who was the more pompous and who was the more upper class. And Bush was able to convince the American public that Kerry was too pompous to be president. That he was just too much of white collar, blue blood, who didn't know what it was like to struggle. And a lot of people said in 2004, George Bush is the guy I'd have a beer with. John Kerry, maybe a glass of wine and shrimp cocktail. Right? Latte drinker. All this stuff. They tried to do this to Obama. Latte drinking liberals. That was repeated. Stephen Colbert made a big skit about it. Like all these people saying these ridiculous things. But anyway. But the bigger issue is, when they all go to the same schools and they all hang around the same places and they all know each other, are there different? Are their views really that different? Some people say yes. Mills, on the other hand, said no. It creates a situation where you don't even need. It's like gas stations. They don't need to talk to each other to collude. They just walk outside and see what price the Shell station is. Maybe I'll put mine 1 cent lower. Right? And the proof is, when oil goes up on the market, the barrel of oil goes up on the market, the gasoline in the ground didn't come from that barrel that cost $110. It came from one that was $95. But the price of gasoline goes up like that, doesn't it? That day, when the barrel of oil goes down, does the price of gasoline go down immediately? No. It barely goes down at all sometimes. That's why I love New Jersey. They got rid of all those taxes. That's the place to get gasoline. That part of New Jersey is that northern part. It's one of the most dangerous areas with all the refineries. That place stinks like Detroit. Inner city Detroit. So, by the factories. If you've never been to Detroit, and you want to see like what Mad Max, RoboCop kind of thing looks like, that's it. Okay. I've heard people from Flint, Michigan in particular, who went to Iraq and said that parts of Baghdad look better than Flint. It's pretty bad. And there wasn't a war that went on in Detroit. Or at least not an open one. Maybe one with the police. So anyway. While the secondary elite institutions work to enhance or reinforce values like the unrealistic aspects of the postmodern American dream and the culture of individualism to keep the lower classes divided and chasing a seemingly impossible dream of being wealthy, when you cultivate, one of the things Mills said, and many other people, not just him, said this, when you cultivate an attitude that everybody's success or failure depends upon their individual characteristics, it prevents people from developing group consciousness. It prevents, when you have poor people, and they use race to divide people. Marx said, hey, poor people share a lot of things in common. Their social situation, how they get treated, their potential for success. And what happens in the United States is racism divides poor, white, black, Asian, and Latino people and makes them enemies out of each other. And then within each one of those groups, within poor white people, individualism divides people and says, you're the enemy because you're trying to get a job that I want. When in reality, what Marx said, not Mills, Marx said, hey, all poor people have similar characteristics and they should come together and stand up to the true enemy, which are elites. And Noam Chomsky, for example, who wasn't a Marxist but he's a conflict theorist, he said sports and entertainment are like the way Rome used circuses to distract the public for all the corruption going on, right? And also to bring people of different classes together. When you're at Giant Stadium, or Jet Stadium, although it's never going to be called that, should have built that stadium on the west side of the city. Now you have to go to the stadium every time you play your home game, okay? When you're in Giants Stadium watching a Giants game, or at the Super Bowl, do you care what if the guy next to you is cheering for the Giants? Do you care if he's upper middle class or lower class? Unless he spills beer on you, and then it's like, hey, scum. Right? But as soon as you get outside the stadium, all of a sudden he gets in a Mercedes, you get a Volkswagen, or vice versa. Although Volkswagens aren't bad anymore. Although I would say to people who own a Volkswagen, look up the Wikipedia page on Volkswagen and see who founded that company. Because if you don't know, you should know. That's why I will never drive a Volkswagen, ever.
Perfect quote from yesterday's response from, I believe, the Indiana governor on the
On
Obama
what?
speech.
And he was a Republican.
Yeah, he was a Republican, and he was the proposed Wednesday. President Obama wants us to believe this is a nation of haves and have-nots. This is not, and will never become a nation like that. America will always be a nation of haves and will-haves.
Yeah,
And
which,
that was really interesting.
right, well, it's like really splitting hairs. And I would say to the governor of Indiana, that's good that you're successful, don't speak for other people. You know, and I'd say the same thing about Obama. You are a success. There are a lot of people out there who are not, and are highly frustrated and angered. And no matter what you say or what you do, it's not going to deflect that. I think one of the interesting things is what the governor of Indiana was attempting to do is something that Mill said, is that the elites want to draw attention away from the conflict and the exploitation that they are engaged in.
And
They don't want...
to what you can get in the future.
Yeah, the public... Apple Computer does not want you to know where iPads come from. They don't want you to know. Because it might engender a response of consciousness, of guilt, that wage slaves in China who are being mistreated, some of them 14, 15 years old, have to work 20 hours a day. You think I'm joking? Watch China Blue. It was a documentary done on a Levi's factory in the south of China. I think it was in Canton province. And they got paid 6 cents an hour. They did get paid overtime, they didn't get paid time and a half, and they lived in ratty little... The places they lived in made the dorms look like the Taj Mahal. They put 12 people in a room that wasn't a quarter of this size. And they even had American inspectors come in, and the American inspectors were like, oh wow, great, they can eat where they sleep. It's like, no! Oh great, the shower is in the kitchen. Like an efficiency, everybody ever been in an efficiency apartment? It's just one, it's basically one room. And especially in New York, it's like a closet. And the kitchen is, the shower is, and I think the toilet too, are right next to the sink, the kitchen sink in the, oh, I'm not kidding you. And there might be one window and it looks out onto a brick wall. And I can bet you there's roaches and rats crawling around. Frankly, those roaches on Park Avenue, they just hold their pinky up and eat caviar.
It's like the people who make the Mardi Gras beads, like the district that they live in.
Did they do a documentary on that?
Yeah, they did. I did it my last sociology class last semester.
Which hat?
Professor Rogers. And they showed us that, like, the conditions they lived in, they worked like 6
Were they down in South America?
Yes. They worked like 6 cents, and they would work 12-hour shifts, and there would be like 8 of them.
Oh, okay.
There'd be like 8 of them in one room.
Yeah. That sounds a lot like China Blue. Do you remember the name of the documentary?
No, not like
I'll ask Jim. No, but that's an excellent point. And again, did you hear Obama say anything about that? Now, I did find an article on CNBC where him and Jobs got into an argument at a public forum. The president said, Steve, what do we need to do to get more iPhones made in the United States? And Steve Jobs said, those jobs are never coming back. You can just forget about it. He said that to the president. But Steve Jobs did. There was a student at LIU, at the Brooklyn campus, that when the iPads came out, she wanted to know why, if Apple could do anything to make it more compatible with their homework. Steve Jobs wrote back in an email, and he did respond. He said, I did not design the iPad to help you with your homework. Like, tough crap. Deal with it. This was not the nicest guy in the world. I think people maybe sympathize with him because he was sick. There's a lot of sick people. Hitler was sick. I didn't sympathize with him. And again, I'm not saying Steve Jobs is Hitler, but don't just sympathize with, don't forgive people because that they're suffering from some illness. I'm not saying be mean to people because of that, but I think a lot of people go, don't say that about Steve Jobs, he had liver cancer. That doesn't absolve you of being a jerk. All right, Richard Nixon had a blood clot in his leg. I'm not going to forgive him for Watergate because he was in pain. I mean, come on. What if Bill Clinton would have said, "Oh my God, I got a disease. Don't impeach me. Come on, man. Be cool." I don't think he was scared. He's like, "So what, man? You should see what the French president does." He's too busy rewinding that Janet Jackson Super Bowl video. Anyway. Man. Anyway. Wish I was there. There's a joke about Bill Clinton. He went to a philanthropist convention and thought it was a philandering convention. Where's the philandering? Anyway. If you don't know, philandering means cheating. Philanthropy means giving money away. This has happened. It's the 5th time this has happened. Anyway. But again, Mills didn't ignore these other institutions. He said, look, the media, which is connected to the economic political elites. Think about Rupert Murdoch, all these people who own, Bloomberg owns a media company, right? You think that doesn't help you? Religion, education, even family. Were you in elementary school, were you taught the tenets of communism? You were taught about capitalism, right? And you're also taught stuff like George Washington, he chopped down a cherry tree and his parents asked him if he did it and he never told a lie. He had wooden teeth and he was an honorable man. He was a failed British soldier. Is what he was. And he was a racist. And he owned slaves. And he treated women like dirt. But they made you believe that this guy walked on water. He never did anything bad. Thomas Jefferson is even worse. This is a man who wrote, "All men are created equal." He owned 200 human beings. And had a family with Sally Heming, which he denied for decades that he had kids with them. Believe it or not, his father is one of my distant ancestors. And my ancestor is actually the product of Peter Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, and a slave. So I technically am like 1/64th black. I know I don't look it. Technically African American, which is not black. So you can see that. But again, and I'll tell you right now, if your family's been in the United States for a long time, I encourage you to look in your background. Michelle Obama, for example, found out she had white people in her family. So, things like that. Anyway, it's interesting. So, but it tells you too that the history that's told in educational institutions is told for a reason. Marxists would say it's cultural imperialism. They're teaching you lies. Like, how come they don't teach you what happened to the Native Americans? Yeah, because they were murdered, and people like Andrew Jackson defied the Supreme Court, sent the Cherokee Nation on a trail of tears. Also, this is another thing they used to do. We think biological warfare is new. It's not. They used to fling plague-infected bodies over into cities for sea. I'm not kidding. But you know what? We would the United States government would sign a peace treaty with the Native American tribes, and they would bring as a present, as a peace offering, blankets that were infected with smallpox. Here you go. Hey, here's some whiskey to wash down the smallpox. If the smallpox don't get you, try this fire water. Yes.
Quick question. So if they teach you this stuff, like coming up in grade school, why do they have financial aid for you to go to college?
To undo it. To have me. So I guess they think you're not mature enough. I think they also think that if they get you at 7 and 8, you're more likely to believe to have a harder. Here's the problem. When you have believed a lie like Santa Claus, it takes a long time to knock that belief out of your mind that, damn it, George Washington. So you end up going, well, George Washington had some bad characteristics, but in general he was good. They want that good part to be laid down first, and then they go, oh, by the way, this is what Andrew Jackson did. I mean, this guy's on the $20 bill. He murdered more Indians than you could ever believe. He killed more people than you could ever believe. He fought in the War of 1812, and in the Battle of New Orleans, which the war was over by the battle started, I think like 7,000 to 8,000 people died, and the war was already over. All right, Andrew Jackson, and by the way, he lost the presidency. He went to the House of Representatives. And he lost to John Quincy Adams, who was the son of a president. It's weird the way that election mirrored the one in 2000, and he started campaigning immediately after. And when he was elected and inaugurated, he invited a bunch of his rowdy friends from Tennessee. They wrecked the White House, and it got so bad, they were so drunk and crazy, they caught the curtains on fire, and the president had to leave out the back door. You know? So we don't get these stories about what these people do.
Well, a counterpoint would be that at, age 7, 8, 9, 8th grade, 7, 9, high school, whatever, you need to actually lay the foundation for national myth in order to be, a good and productive citizen and actually enjoy where you are, like much like in every other country. I mean, coming from a Greek citizen education, we get the same exact myths about Greek history.
About like the Golden Age.
Golden Age, going back to the revolution in the 1820s,
Or even the Civil War after World War II, right?
Well, we don't get taught that until college. No,
Because they don't want to talk about communism and the British intervened.
Right, but most of our parents have actual, grandfathers that knew about it, so we have personal accounts. Still, it's still, relatively new.
Right.
It's just every nation mangles up its own history to make themselves look good. That's,
But
that's
conflict
what it is.
theorists would say that's a form of manipulation, and it's done to make people loyal to the system at the expense of the truth. Just like the Soviet Union, they said Stalin's the greatest guy in the world. He's murdering 20 million of his own people,
No, I understand what you're saying.
No, but I understand your point as well, that they're sort of, again, and I think it was making the point here, they're laying down the groundwork to where once you lay down the foundation of a building, unless you get a jackhammer and pull it up, it's not coming up. Whereas the superstructure, you can knock that down and rebuild, right? And I think that's what they want to lay down, this foundation of lies, or at least exaggerations, at the very minimum. Historians said, look, George Washington never cut down no damn cherry tree. It said that stupid stuff. That never happened. And I'm not even sure Ben Franklin was out there flying a kite, and I assure you people were going, wow, Ben, you're a real smart guy. They're probably like, look at this, look at Franklin out there. What the hell's his problem? What I tell you about that pot-headed, beer-drinking idiot? Kids, don't go around Franklin, okay? He's got something wrong with you.
You guys got it, though. I was
Okay.
going to say something about it.
All right, let's move on here a little bit. So let's move on to symbolic interactionism. Now, unlike the first two approaches we looked at, which are macro-focused and focused on large structures and institutions and ideologies and cultural belief systems, symbolic interaction takes a different tack. And it was actually came out of the need to look at, well, you know what? It's one thing to look at the presidency. It's another thing to look at who's the president and how he reacts to people. Is he charismatic? One of the things that sociologists in the very beginning had a hard time taking account of is the impact of individuals inside the social system. They had a lot of things done about how does culture impact your personality, but they didn't have a lot of detail about how personality impacted the way organization behaved or how it impacted the culture. Like you're telling me that Thomas Edison had no impact on American society, right? That individuals can't have an impact? Go ask the Germans if one person can make a difference. Or at least one person with a bunch of other people following right in behind him. Okay. Or like, remember, Franklin Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That line is repeated over and over again because it is felt that it was his personality and weight of his humanness that quelled people's fear and helped the recovery along. Now, in reality, the Depression didn't end until World War II started. Actually, when we started the Lend-Lease program to Europe. So anyway. But unlike the structural functionalist and social conflict paradigms, the symbolic interactionist perspective takes a more micro-level orientation to social institutions. And those of you who remember from intro, micro-level means small groups, individuals, small organizations. And the symbolic interactionist, again, would be more interested in the personalities and the individual life stories of the president than the actual what the president can do and how he's defined in the Constitution. That's structural. That the president can veto bills, and he's the commander-in-chief, and he's the head of state, and all these other things. What more important is, how does Obama or Bush or Clinton differ in how they dealt with those issues, how they adjudicated the duties of their office, right? How their personality. I mean, if you're a Republican, you love Bush's personality. The all shucks, and I'm going to go to my farm, and I'm going to knock down some trees, and I'm from Texas, and look at me, buddy. You know, put my baseball hat on and go to the Texas Rangers game. I mean, people love that kind of stuff about him. Democrats on the other side, or people that didn't like Bush, saw he was just some ignorant hick who was using his family's name to get to office so he could give all his friends a bunch of money. And then he was using this all shucks stuff to fool the American people. I'm just like one of you. I went to Harvard and Yale. And I'm worth $250 million. I'm just like you. Right? They did this with Clinton, too. When Clinton came out, they said he was the man from Hope, Arkansas. The man from Hope. That's what they called him. Okay. Not the man from this that goes to the strip club every day. Which is probably what he was. He probably watched internet porn. You can't be the president and go to strip clubs. I guess when you got interns, you don't need porn. Anyway, I'll tell you personally, I like Clinton a lot, but that stuff bothered me because it distracted him from what was really going on, and it potentially made this country vulnerable. Because instead of the Congress and the executive branch doing the duty of the United States and protecting us and watching out for the economy, they were worried about somebody in their thong underwear sticking cigars up places they shouldn't have cigar stuff. I mean, the absurdity of what happened in the Linda Tripp stuff and video or audio taping your friend and all this other stuff, it was just absurd. So it bothered a lot of people. But again, symbolic interactionists would look at that. How did that impact the presidency? Why did Bill Clinton do those types of things? So symbolic interactionists see society as a product of the everyday interactions with individuals, not these large, faceless organizations. The DMV, and here's an example of the DMV. One of my friends said that he went to go register a new car and the inspection sticker was still valid. And he asked the DMV, the woman behind the counter, he said, do I need to get a new inspection sticker? And she said, well, you're supposed to, but nobody will know. So don't worry about it. Does that sound like the structure was in place, or people's personalities and humanness was overtaking the situation? Because you know what? That woman is a person too, and she owns a car, and then everybody knows that the inspection sticker's a scam. I think I mentioned this before anyway. I saw a van the other day that had its rear end in the back, the rear lights, the brake lights, stuck on with duct tape. They had a valid inspection sticker. If you're not going to take that car off the road, then how dare you take my Nissan? I had an old Nissan Sentra. How dare you not let that pass? And the emission standards. Why do oxygen sensors cost $600? I can understand catalytic converters. They got platinum. It's nonsense. And it looks like the Mechanic Full Employment Act is what it looks like. And very rarely have I ever taken my car and it's just $50. Right? Oh, you need brakes, tires, windshield wire, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. So whether at home or in a family, in the workplace with coworkers, or as students at school with teachers or other students, life is made up of interactions, and humans use symbols, language, the way you dress, body language, what car you have, the house you have. You send these messages to people. And now part of it, obviously, the material is provided by culture, but you decide. It's like media. It's like symbolic interactionists would view culture and other aspects like this. It's like a salad bar or a smorgasbord. The culture is the choices on the table, right? There's lettuce, there's tomatoes, all this stuff. Your individual goal is you choose what elements of culture you want. Maybe somebody likes tomatoes, somebody else likes mushrooms, right? Maybe somebody likes the individualistic nature of America, but they still want to be cooperative and be part of voluntary organizations. See that you choose individually. And it's similar with media taste, right? There's a lot of media tastes out there. You pick and choose which one you want, part in relation to your identity, right? Your personality. You're not going to like Lady Gaga if she doesn't fit with your viewpoint, right? You're not going to listen to Eminem unless you view it, like he's very political, right? You're not going to listen to that if you don't agree with a lot of his views. Okay? But having said that, it's still curious why a bunch of upper middle class white people listen to Jay-Z. Although he's rich now, so it does make sense, right? What's interesting is that the audience when rap and hip hop started out was not white. It was not predominantly white. Now it is. So it shifted. And I would say that most of what rap artists talk about, most middle-class people have never experienced in their life. Being on welfare, living in the projects, being shot at, going to bed hungry, going to terrible schools. My sister went to a school where they tried to steal her jacket every single day. Probably shouldn't have been wearing a Carolina Panthers NFL jacket, but she learned eventually. They did take her coat. Anyway, the society reality, or what people make of them, this latter point earmarks a critical tenet of interactionism, that realities in society are created or socially constructed by individuals. What democracy means is not just what people tell you at school, it's what you think of it about it too, how you interpret it. Same with capitalism. That's why there's so much difference of opinion. Symbolic interactionists would explain difference of opinion as just individual expressions of the larger culture. But there are subcultures. You guys, please, if you're not doing something related to class, please turn that on. At one level, though, consensus or shared meaning is one of the key aspects that in order for people to communicate with symbols, you have to be able to recognize my symbols. Like, if you ever, I'm sure this has happened, I'm from a different generation. I use, like, if you ever watch Futurama or The Simpsons, you ever watch a show and they make references to things and you don't know what the hell they're talking about? Right? A movie or something? Again, because part of it, they're targeting that at a different generation. That's sort of that, and that becomes a problem. Like if handshaking is not universal, when I stick my hand out, you might not know what the hell I'm doing, right? So there has to be some level of shared consensus. But the problem is, in a diverse society, that level of sharedness goes down, and it causes conflicts. So democracy is one thing to one group, another thing to another group, and unfortunately, the media makes it look like there's only Democrats and Republicans. There's as much variation between Democrats as between Democrats and Republicans. The same with Republicans, to some extent. So you have all these differing views of, well, that's what democracy means to me, or that's what democracy means to me, or take an issue like abortion. There's people who feel a myriad of different ways. And here's the problem: do they want to compromise or negotiate with each other, or do they accept the other person's view? Do pro-choice people accept pro-life views and respect that? And it's the other way too, right? So it's a problem. This can cause serious social conflict. Yes, Tom, quickly.
And yeah, it's not even just pro-choice and pro-life. There's many groups, many groups within each.
And there's a lot of issues, millions of issues.
Trimester, only after,
gay marriage,
right?
Yeah, and many times the politicians know this stuff, and so if they want to divide the electorate, they just come out with a statement. Rick Santorum said that and I don't think he actually meant this, but in a debate, he compared homosexuality to bestiality. And to show you that people didn't share that meaning, some people did. The majority of Americans were like, what did you just say? Even people who didn't necessarily didn't agree with homosexual marriage. Look, there's a difference between being accepting of homosexuality and going a step further and saying you support gay marriage. And there's a lot of people in the United States that accept homosexuality and were offended by that comment, but also were not in favor of gay marriage. So it's really subtle. You think that, well, these people were all supporters of gay marriage. They're not. But they were upset by Rick Santorum. How dare you? You're telling me you're going to compare sex between two human beings to sex between an animal and a human being. Okay? Which, by the way, if you're royalty, I guess that's just, or you're a Roman emperor, that's just what you do. So if you're Caligula or you're Catherine the Great, you have sex with your horse. Yes, Anna.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
But it relates back to the elitist theory. So the media as a secondary organization that, constructs our perceptions and whatnot. When you mentioned Jay-Z, this is what brought this to mind. A recent baby that he and Beyonce had, and how the hospital restricted before the other people who had. And
they'll explain that as safety.
Right.
Not only for him, but for the other patients who were in the hospital. Because, and they're partly right. You cannot have a major celebrity in a public hospital wing just wide open because somebody will find out and Twitter it or tweet it, and it'll be all over the place, and there'll be literally 500,000 people there.
Yes.
If he would have went to the middle of nowhere in Canada, it might not happen. Go ahead. Sorry.
But no. And my question is more of pertaining to celebrity prominence and how the media. So is that socially constructed that we have made our celebrities part of the elites now?
Yeah, they're sort of power. You know what they remind me of? You know how the royal family in England is like out in front, but they really don't have any power. That's what celebrities remind me of. No, I'm not going to listen to any celebrity tell me who to vote for or what product to buy. And I know a lot of you feel the same way. Now, although a lot of you, if you see Lady Gaga wearing True Religion jeans, will go out and buy them. Not because you necessarily want to follow her, because they look good, right? There's a big thing with the symbol on the back of people's jeans. It's like a status symbol now. When I was a kid, it was like Levi's and Wranglers and Guess jeans. And that was about it. There was no Tommy Hilfiger. There wasn't no True Religion. Does Couture make jeans too? Are there any celebrity genes? There's like, you know, Jay-Z had like, didn't he have like, or doesn't Pete? Right, doesn't Pete, did he have like Ciroc vodka or something? Who is it? Who is it?
His clothing name is Sean.
Oh, okay. Keeps changing his name, P, whatever, Diddy or whatever it is. Anyway. But to continue, the social construction of reality is important in understanding how institutions behave. Symbolic interactions view institutions as being made up of the collective interactions. So sociologists or symbolic interactionists would not necessarily just be interested in looking at the rules of the organization. Remember my example of my friend at the DMV? They'd be more interested in how people get around the rules, or how do individuals interpret the rules and enforce them. Like the example I was using in my other institutions class was speeding. The stated law, the de jure law, 55 miles an hour. If you go 1 mile over that, you should have a ticket. Is that the way it works? Hell no. And it's actually the opposite. You do 55 miles an hour on the Northern State Parkway. Listen to me, camera. Okay? And people will blow past you like you're walking backwards on your hands on broken glass. Even if you do 65, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to take this camera out and I'm going to get somebody to drive me around and we're going to put the cruise control on 55 and I will show you. I'll put that on YouTube. Okay? And I have seen, and I've had people tell me they have blown past cops doing 80. And the guy didn't even look at him. What does that sin? What's the... So we have the rule. The rule is 55. What's the effective speed limit on the Northern State? What is it roughly?
70.
Not 75, 70, 75. You can go 70 easy. No one's even going to look at you. Frankly, all the other cars are going to go past you. I always play this game called Chase the Rabbit. Whoever's the fastest car on the highway, I get behind them and follow about 5 car lengths. That way if the cops pick somebody up, they're not going to come after me. What are they going to do, arrest the whole highway? It's a fun game. I've never been... I'm not putting my name on it. Hey, you know what? I'm not telling the cops anything they don't know. Do you really, especially when it's cold and rainy, do you think they want to stand out there? First of all, when you pull someone over and they might be a criminal and they might shoot you, first of all, and hope, even if that doesn't happen, do you think the average person is going to be happy? Right? I mean, the police officers, this is part of public safety. You can't have people doing 100 miles an hour on the road. Okay? But the cops don't want to stand out in the rain. They don't want to stand out in the cold. They don't want to get some pissy attitude about, what was I doing, officer, right? And, oh, come on, man. Some other people were driving even faster. Or just the attitude of, like, sign this. I'll see you in court, officer. And a lot of people challenge speeding tickets because if the cop doesn't show up, you know what happens to the ticket?
It goes west.
Do you think cops want to spend their time sitting on a court bench waiting for you to get there? And does court ever start on time?
Nope.
No.
Sometimes they lose your paperwork. I'm like, I'm out of here. They lose my paperwork. I'm out of there. Like, we don't have your parking ticket. The parking ticket, on the other hand, they always like to get that. I saw a security guard up here outside of the library, and some kid, some young person, and he was in a pretty nice car. He parked, and I think he probably looked like a professor. That's why they didn't bother him. He parked in the handicapped spot near the fire zone, right out front of the library. And the security guard was like, yelling at him, like, you better move that car, blah, blah, blah. The dude didn't even move his car. He shut the door and went back in the library, and the security guard, don't move from where you are. He was not walking. And I remember thinking, man, arrest that guy. Come on. That wasn't any of you, was it?
They told the cars though.
Do they?
Yeah.
They should at least give him a ticket.
They started from last semester to tell cars not to park.
Well, especially in a handicapped zone, you know what I mean? Or a fire zone. What are you doing? You know, what if somebody really did, you know, because look, we're trying to be equal opportunity here. My mom, when she was sick, she was in a wheelchair. That would have upset me if she went to the grocery store and had to park 5 miles away. You know, people have to be considerate. And this is an example. People use, now this was just one person in one incident, but people will use that example as they see people are at a stop sign. No, that guy was. Okay? Anyway. Postmodernism here is that, and again, this is a very difficult term to understand, but I think as we go along, you'll understand what it means for social institution. And it's basically the idea of the loss of legitimacy. Okay? So postmodernity, or the postmodern condition, it is kind of the natural extension of the modern world. The modern world was a world of belief in technology, belief in institutions, belief in rational thought and ideas. We'll talk about rationality here. And the idea that, hey, we can scientific positivism is this idea that we can apply science to problems. I know this is bizarre for you guys to hear, but in the early 1960s, your government and many people in this society thought literally that if we applied rational rules and logic and tried to examine the problems of society, that we could solve all of them. That we'd get rid of crime, we'd get rid of disease. Richard Nixon in 1970 said, we're going to wipe cancer off the earth.
You failed miserably, Richard.
And many things, not only that. Johnson had the war on poverty. Do we still have poverty? Called it the Great Society. It's going to be the Great Society. Here's the other thing. That science can do no wrong. When plastic came along, people said, man, plastic is the greatest thing ever invented. Go ask the Pacific Ocean what it feels about plastic. There's 2 gigantic balls of plastic in the northern Pacific. Here's another thing. Does plastic really effectively in a human life, from a human time perspective, does it ever really deteriorate? We're talking hundreds of thousands of years for some types of plastics. How about radioactivity? Do you think the place where Chernobyl blew up is ever going to be habitable? Here's the thing. When nuclear power came along, they said, we don't have to burn coal anymore. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. They neglected to mention we were going to use it for weapons. I love this. The United States currently has about, it depends on what figures you look at, over 5,000 nuclear warheads. Almost all of them are multiple warheads. We could blow the Earth up, and with the Russians too, we could blow the Earth up probably 100 times. What's the point of that? Right? It seems crazy that humans have gotten to the point where we can destroy ourselves and every living thing on it. We are now the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. We are the asteroid. Or at least that's the way some people would look at it. That's the way postmodernists would look at it. They would also look at religious ideas of good and evil. These things are meaningless now. A lot of postmodernists are atheists. They believe religion is just a way to manipulate the masses the way Marx did. Marx called religion the opiate of the masses. Anyway, also things like rationality, structuralism to explain and control problems. Increasing social chaos is what postmodernists see for the future, and constant cultural change. And this leads to an anime, or the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, that you're just a boat lost in the storm. You can't change what your government's going to do. You can't stop the national debt. You can't stop the housing crisis. If they call you off to war, you're going to have to go. If some terrorist wants to kill you, it's going to happen. I mean, look, we went, in 1950, if you would have said to somebody, you know what, in 2001, 19 morons are going to hijack 4 planes and run them into buildings. You'd have been like, what? Why would somebody do that? Right? That wouldn't be even something that somebody conceived of. Although they drop nuclear weapons on people. Anyway, that they could conceive of. It's also a crisis of legitimation. The government's lost its credibility. Corporations have lost their credibility. Religion? Has it lost its credibility? I seem to remember some scandal with some churches, not just the Catholic Church, but the Protestant Church, something about kids. Maybe I was confused that with Penn State. Anyway. Hey, when you harbor a child molester for 14 years, you don't have any defense. I mean, what kind of absurdity was going on at that school? And not only that, it wasn't just Joe Pa. And it wasn't just administration. Guess who else was covering up? The state college police were covering it up. You're gonna send your kids to Penn State? That guy was using a charity to suck children in. Man, that's like Hansel and Gretel. You build like a house made out of candy and hope the kids show up. You see him in the van. Hey kids, it's some candy. I mean, man, that's just messed up. Anyway, but again, also things like the rise of the simulacra hyperreality. Some people spend more time on Second Life and in World of Warcraft than they do in their real life. Or instead of playing golf or playing tennis, guess what people do? Or fishing. Yeah! And they think it's the same. Or instead of going on vacation to Siberia, you just watch a documentary. Or now, with 3D movies, which I don't think is a good idea for a lot of things, it's just like you're really there. I would say with HD television, people are always like, I have like a 720p, and everybody's like, get a 1080p. I think that the football commentators look ugly enough. Dan Deerdorf looks like a Halloween mask or something like that. He looks like a villain in like a horror movie. He looks like Two-Face, except for the whole face is like that. Phil Simms ain't, and I'm not saying I'm beautiful. If I was on HGTV, it would be ugly too. But people say HGTV is great. You can see the sweat on their face. You can also see a lot of other horrible stuff. Believe it or not, I saw this story on Yahoo. It has altered the behavior of porn stars. Because they have issues like shape bumps and stuff like that. So, like the way their body parts look on HD, I mean the bizarreness of that too. So, anyway, we're not done yet. Don't anybody go anywhere. I do want to read one area from the book to get you timed up to talk about what we're going to be talking about next time. On page 64. Says the following, and pay attention particularly to this chart on 65. That one of the things that has occurred from the past until now is that the nature and shape and behavior of institutions has been altered. From a traditional agricultural society that was based on family ties, to larger urban industrial societies that are more based on strangers. If you were born in the 1600s, the chances that you would virtually spend a small percentage of your time with somebody you didn't know, like personally. Everybody in your community you knew, everybody in your family you knew. It was kind of annoying because everybody knew every little thing. It was like living inside the National Enquirer. And I actually lived in small towns. It's infuriating. I lived in a town of 3,000 people in Nome, Alaska. Everybody knew everything about everybody, and they ran their mouth all day long because there was nothing else to do. So, but in an urban society, you deal with strangers. So on page 64 it says the following. Until recently, people were immersed in a traditional orientation to life. The idea that the past is the best guide for making decisions today. If that was the case, we'd still be throwing people into volcanoes. In this view, what exists is good because it has passed the test of time. Sometimes it doesn't pass the test of time. Customs and relationships based on them have served people well, and they should not be abandoned lightly. Essential orientation of traditional society is to protect the status quo, no matter how good or bad it is. Change is viewed with suspicion and comes about slowly, if at all. This is what we call the nominal, not politically conservative position, but this is a conservative position. Look, if it works, don't fix it. It's like ESPN's website. Every time I go on there, they can reconfigure it. It's like, enough already. Stop with this stuff. Imagine if every 2 years they change the street signs to all the streets. Change the name of the highways. A GPS system would still drive you into traffic. The traditional orientation to life stands in the way of industrialization. As Table 1 shows, the traditional orientation is based on personal relationships. Deep obligation and responsibility, which are often lifelong, permeate society. And what counts as production is not who is the best at doing something, but the relationships that people have. And it creates somewhat of an inefficient system. Move to page 65. Modern societies, though, are run by rationality. And it says here, as you look on table 1, that personal relationships are replaced by impersonal short-term contracts. The bottom line results become the primary concern, and the rule of thumb methods give way to explicit means of measuring results. This change to rationality, judging things according to the bottom line instead of by personal relationships, is a fundamental divergence from all of human history. And just as importantly, from a scientific standpoint, instead of saying stuff like, well, your crops failed because God hates you, or your family died from the plague because you're a sinner. Instead, people said, hey, maybe it's these damn rats that are crawling around your home that are causing the disease. Maybe your crops fail because the soil pH is bad. That using rational logic observation to understand how the world works prevents major mistakes from happening. Because if you say the sinners are the reason why the plague happened, you get rid of the sinners, what happens to the plague? It's still there. Again, I told you, man, it's nothing like a bunch of cats to get rid of the plague. Anyway, all right, everybody, have a good weekend. Keep up with the readings, and I'll see you on Monday.